Deve kamavarodatto Deve kamavarodatto Mahyam Tribhuvaneshware Mahyam Tribhuvaneshware Navrinetamaham kamam Navrinetamaham kamam Bhutabhavana bhavanaha Bhutabhavana bhavanaha Deve kamavarodatto Mahyam Tribhuvaneshware Navrinetamaham kamam Bhutabhavana bhavanaha Deve kamavarodatto Mahyam Tribhuvaneshware Navrinetamaham kamam Bhutabhavana bhavanaha. Please chant. Bhavana bhavana Deve kamavarodatto Mayam Tribhuvaneshware Navrineham kamam Bhuta bhavana bhavana. Matajis Deve kamavarodatto Mayam Tribhuvaneshware Navrineham taham kamam Bhuta bhavana bhavanaha. Please repeat after me. Deve, by the demigods, Kamavaraha, the benediction to have whatever he wanted. Dattaha was given. Mahyam, unto me. Tribhuvana Ishware, by the demigods, the protectors of the three worlds. Navrine, did not accept. Tam, that. Aham, I. Kamam, everything desirable within this material world. Bhuta bhavana bhavanaha, being fully absorbed in the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Translation. The demigods, the directors of the three worlds, wanted to give me whatever benediction I desired. I did not want their benedictions, however, because I am interested in the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who created everything in this material world. I am more interested in the Supreme Personality of Godhead than in all material benedictions. Please repeat after me. The demigods, the directors of the three worlds, wanted to give me whatever benediction I desired. I did not want their benedictions. However, because I am interested in the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who created everything in this material world, I am more interested in the Supreme Personality of Godhead than in all material benedictions. Purport. A devotee is always transcendentally situated. Param drishtva nivartate. One who has seen the Supreme Personality of Godhead is no longer interested in material sense enjoyment. Even such an exalted devotee as Dhruv Maharaj went to the forest for the sake of material benefit. But when he actually saw the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he refused to accept any material benediction. He said, Swamin kritarthosmi varam nayache. My dear Lord, I am fully satisfied with whatever you have given me or not given me. I have nothing to ask from you, for I am fully satisfied to be engaged in your service. This is the mentality of a pure devotee who does not want anything, material or spiritual, from the personality of Godhead. Our Krishna consciousness movement is therefore called Krishna Bhavnamrita Sangha, the association of persons who are simply satisfied in thoughts of Krishna. Being absorbed in thoughts of Krishna is neither expensive nor troublesome. Krishna says, Manmana bhava madbhakto madhyachi mam namaskuru. Engage your mind always in thinking of me, offer obeisances and worship me. Anyone can think of Krishna without difficulties or obstacles. This is called Krishna Bhavnamrita. One who is absorbed in Krishna Bhavnamrita has no material benefits to ask from Krishna. Instead, such a person prays to the Lord for the benediction of being able to spread His glories all over the world. Mama janmani janmanishware bhavatat bhakti rahetuki tvai. A Krishna conscious person does not even want to stop his cycle of birth and death. He simply prays, I may take birth as you like, but my only prayer is that I may be engaged in your service. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Presthaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Deenabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyaevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Deve Kama Varodatto Mahyam Tri Bhuvaneshware Na Vrine Tamaham Kamam Bhuta Bhavana Bhavanaha. The demigods, the directors of the three worlds, wanted to give me whatever benediction I desired. I did not want their benedictions, however, because I am interested in the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who created everything in this material world. I am more interested in the Supreme Personality of Godhead than in all material benedictions. So this is the section of Khatvanga Maharaj, a very instructive section for all of us. And we see that in this particular verse, Khatvanga Maharaj, although being offered all benedictions, all material benedictions by the demigods, he is choosing not to ask anything from them at all. And he is only opting for pure devotional service instead. So this is a typical characteristic of the prayers of pure devotees. Shri Radharas Pyari Bhagwan ki jai, Shri Ram Lakshman Hanuman ki jai, Shri Gaur Nitai ki jai. So here he is himself confessing that I am more interested in the Supreme Lord. Now, if you see these couple of verses here, Khatvanga Maharaj, he is introspecting. These are not prayers. He is introspecting and he is talking to himself. Ordinarily in the material world, if somebody talks to himself, people say, "Ye pagal ho gaya hai." They say he is madman if he talks to himself. But here we see that Khatvanga Maharaj is analyzing his own situation. So, just to give a little background, Khatvanga Maharaj, because of assisting the demigods who were pleased with him, asked him, ask for any benediction you like. And Khatvanga Maharaj, because of his fine advanced intelligence, which is a characteristic of somebody who has been purified by the practice of devotional service. At that moment, he asks the demigods, how much time do I have left? And then he is given the reply that only a moment. So then Khatwanga Maharaj, without wasting time, he goes back to his residence and then he fixes his mind onto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So these are the verses that we are reading. These verses are those where Khatwanga Maharaj, he has gone back to his residence and now he is cutting off all other material distractions and trying to focus his mind on the Supreme Lord. In the previous verse, we saw that he was talking to himself, he's analyzing, self-analyzing, that even when I was small, I was not attracted by insignificant things or irreligious principles. Even when I was small, even when I was young, I did not find anything more than the Supreme Lord to be substantial. Now, when one is talking like this to himself, it may seem that he is falsely proud. Otherwise, how can we say that I am not attached? But here we see that this is Khatwanga Maharaj's advanced intelligence. Srila Prabhupada mentions that a devotee who has been purified enough, his intelligence is advanced. That means that he can stop himself from material desires also. So this section, a couple of verses that we are reading, this is something like introspection. Khatwanga Maharaj is introspecting. This is a principle that we can actually apply in our spiritual life also, wherein we can analyze our own situation. Just like Maharaj Khatwanga, although Maharaj Khatwanga is on the level of a pure devotee, but still this principle of introspective analysis can be applied in our lives also, wherein we can think that what is my current situation? And always being remindful of this thought that it's just a question of some time. I just have some time. We can fix our mind back onto the Supreme Lord and His activities and cut off other attachments, knowing well that it's just a few moments that we have in life. So we see that the Srimad Bhagavatam also starts with a similar situation. Parikshit Maharaj, this is the first canto, the second last chapter, it is the Parikshit Maharaj who is cursed. And when Maharaj Parikshit is cursed by the Brahmin boy, he comes to know of it and he sits down on the bank of the river Ganges, fasting till death. And at that time, other rishis and sages also assemble there. And Maharaj Parikshit, he is thinking to himself, he is saying, let my mind be fixed on the Supreme Lord till the time I leave this body. And seeing all the great rishis assembled there, he asks this question, what is the duty of a person in general? And what is the duty of a person specifically who is about to die? So he asks these questions. And then at that moment, Srila Shukdev Goswami arrives on the spot. And then he begins to reply and answer to these questions of Maharaj Parikshit. So Shukdev Goswami, he answers, he says that the highest perfection of life is to remember the Supreme Lord at the time of death. And then he gives example of Maharaj Khatwanga. He says that just like Maharaj Khatwanga, at the time of death, he cut himself off from all materialistic desires and fixed his mind on the Supreme Lord. So this is the highest perfection of life. This is the duty of a man who is about to die. And then this is the Bhagavatam. The Bhagavatam is nothing but an answer to these questions of Maharaj Parikshit, which begins from this, that what is the duty of a man who is about to die? It is interesting that we never really think about how much time do we have. There are many times surveys that are conducted and people are asked, what if today is your last day? What if today was your last day? So there are varied responses that the surveyors usually get. Sometimes people say we'll work on our relationships. Sometimes people say that whatever last few desires that I have, I'll try and fulfill them. Somehow hardly people think about the Supreme Lord, unfortunately, because they aren't educated about Him right from childhood. But Shankaracharya, he says, Balyavastha krida sakta, Tarunavastha taruni sakta, Vriddhavastha chinta sakta, Parabrahmani kopina sakta. So Shripad Shankaracharya, he says in his Bhaja Govindam Stotram, he says that childhood goes in playing around, youth goes in running after the opposite sex, and old age goes in needlessly worrying about things. Where is the time, and who is interested in topics of the Supreme Lord? This is what Shankaracharya says. We see that Maharaj Khatvanga is giving an ideal example of fixing his mind on the Supreme Lord, knowing well that it's just a question of time. He has just a moment left now. In fact, if you see in the Bhagavatam, there are some personalities who got notice of death. Just like we see Maharaj Parikshit, he got a notice. Shukdev Goswami, to encourage Maharaj Parikshit to hear the Bhagavatam, he says, see, Maharaj Khatvanga had only one moment. My dear Parikshit, you have 7 days. So you can absorb yourself in hearing about the Bhagavatam and thereby become purified, and thus your mind will become fixed up on the Supreme Lord. In this way, Shukdev Goswami is encouraging Maharaj Parikshit. You have a notice of 7 days. There are other personalities also who got a notice of death. Like Kamsa. Kamsa also got a death notice. He had couple of years, because in the prediction that was made, he was told that the 8th child of your sister will be the cause of your death. So he had a couple of years. But the question is, how much Krishna conscious was Kamsa? Whereas on the other side we see that Khatvanga Maharaj, who had only a moment, was easily able to fix his mind on the Supreme Lord. And he attributes it to saying that right from childhood, my mind was not fickle, my mind was not attracted by insignificant things. Now, if you see in today's situation, small children today, they are given smartphones by their parents. And the mind becomes so fickle and restless because of the bombardment by media, that it's not possible. Their attention spans are so less, that they can't focus on anything. There is a disorder called attention deficit disorder, ADD, which is very common nowadays, very common. Small children at a young age also, they face this attention deficit. That means they can't focus on anything more than a few seconds. So all of this is attributed to TV and social media and smartphones, which make the mind so fickle that it's impossible to focus. Yesterday I was meeting a laparoscopic surgeon, and he was telling, he was mentioning that, when we meet, we tell people you should chant Hare Krishna. And because stress is so common nowadays. In fact, there was one survey, they said, when are people most stressed? When are people most stressed? So they said people are most stressed during 2 things. One is when their battery is below 10%. And the second time when people are most stressed is when they cannot find their phone. That is when people are so stressed. And we find this is so common, especially in city life. We see everybody is so stressed out. So we happened to meet this surgeon, and discussing with him, he was saying, I'm so stressed out. And then he's saying, but you guys don't have so much stress because you meditate. So we gave him a mantra card and told him, why don't you try chanting also? So he's saying, but what to do? I just cannot focus. Meditation, impossible. He's saying, impossible. He doesn't come from this young generation. He comes from an older generation. But he's saying, he admitted that it is because of all these electronic devices that it's impossible. We need a constant bombardment of videos, of pictures. Because of that, it's not possible to focus the mind. So of course we know that electronic media has its advantages, disadvantages also. But from childhood, if this is inculcated, then it's very beneficial. Sometimes people say that at this young age, why do you have to perform devotional service at this young age? What's the requirement? There was one man who was almost 60 years old, and while we were distributing books to him, he was telling, "Ye koi umar hai kya? Is this the age?" So we replied back saying, "Prahlad Maharaj says 5 years. So we are actually late." So these are different ideas that people have. In fact, in old age, if we see, it is so difficult to remember and fix the mind if it is not focused from a younger age. Many times in our preaching work, we meet people who are extremely successful, extremely rich at a senior age. And generally people have this notion, especially in India, the spirituality is a retirement program. Bhakti will be done only after 70, 65, 70. But when we go and meet them and tell them to chant, it is just not possible. I remember telling my own grandfather, "Now you're so old, why don't you take up Bhagavad Gita and start reading?" So he read the introduction for 2 days and was very much into it. In fact, he quoted to me some aspects of what Prabhupada is writing also in the introduction. And then on the third day when I asked him, "What did you read today?" He's saying, "I just cannot focus. My mind is so restless." So a person who has throughout his life thought about money, thought about material attachments, at the end it is just so difficult to then focus. In fact, we see here Maharaj Khatwanga, not only is he focused, he is not distracted also. In today's verse, Maharaj Khatwanga, he is saying, the demigods are offering him all benedictions. But Maharaj Khatwanga is so focused and undistracted that he is saying that I don't need anything else except the Supreme Lord. This is very ideal. So we had an experience, because just like we're discussing about death now, at the time of death, in 2014, we were in Vrindavan Dham, and we were in a bus going from Kamevan, returning back from Kamevan to Vrindavan, and our bus met with an accident. But it crashed. The tire busted, and then the bus swayed on the extreme side. It brushed against the tree, and then it hit a tree. The bus got torn in between the tree. It went inside. So many devotees got badly injured. Of course, nobody, Krishna's mercy, nobody died or nobody had any kind of major injury. It could have actually been a very bad crash. But we had many brahmacharis, many devotees who were there present on that bus. Now when this episode got over, so we happened to, in the hospital, we went and met the devotees just to inquire how they are. And then we asked all of them, so how many of you, when the tire burst, when you knew that the bus has gone out of control and now it's going to, now your fate is completely in Krishna's hand, how many of you actually remembered Krishna? How many of you actually started chanting Hare Krishna? That's our philosophy, right from the first day. Anybody who comes new, this is what he's taught. So this is the examination. So we asked them, how many of you remembered? So it was surprising, hardly 2 to 5 devotees were chanting. Remaining the entire bus, either devotees were sleeping, some who were very new to Krishna consciousness, they were giving abusive words, and others were just plain afraid. But hardly few of them were able to remember Krishna. So just like Srila Prabhupada mentions, life is preparation and death is examination. We always forget that what may happen to us next moment, we do not know. And in this episode also we saw that hardly people were able to remember, which meant that we failed the test. We failed the test. So how much work we have to do still so that we can remember Krishna at the time of death? So we see that Khatvanga Maharaj is an ideal example of this aspect of remembering Krishna at the time of death. So a pure devotee, we see that here he is not distracted. In the previous verse we saw that he is not, from childhood he is not attached to irreligious principles and insignificant things. So how is it so? Because a pure devotee, he sees Krishna in any situation and every situation. And we see that's the principle of Yukta Vairagya, as His Holiness Gopal Krishna Maharaj was explaining the other day, that it is the principle of Yukta Vairagya that a pure devotee, whenever he sees something, he thinks, how can I engage it in Krishna's service? And there are so many examples of this, of our acharyas, how they utilized various things in Krishna's service. For example, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, before the Gaudiya Math, no sannyasi used to wear sewn cloth. They never used to use cars. But Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati revolutionized. In fact, he used to use, in the Gaudiya Math, he used to have horses also, elephants also. And there was one incident wherein he saw a camel, and he took the camel also, and he used the camel also in the service. He can be used in processions in this way. In fact, Srila Prabhupada also used this principle of Yukta Vairagya. When he landed at an airport, there was one reporter who asked Srila Prabhupada, what do you think about modern technology? So Srila Prabhupada replied, it is useless. So then the reporter asked, what do you think about airplanes? So Srila Prabhupada said, it is useless. Now the reporter thought, he just landed from an airplane. So then he immediately asked, so how come you used an airplane, you took a flight and landed here if it is useless? So Srila Prabhupada replied, to make it useful. So we see in this way that we can utilize everything in the service of the Lord. So pure devotee thinking of Krishna is equal to, just like if you go in Gujarat, if you go to any Gujarati's house, you will see that they always mix sugar or good. All preparations are sweet. Dal is also sweet. Everything is sweet. So just like sugar is a component which is always present in Gujarati cuisine. Likewise, in South Indian cuisine, you will have always coconut. Coconut is used very extensively. It is an inseparable component of the cuisine. In the same way, we see that a pure devotee, he sees Krishna everywhere. Krishna is an inseparable component. Srila Prabhupada, he writes this at many places, that all material things are like big zeros, and Krishna is that one, which makes 2 zeros to 100 and 3 zeros to 1000. There is this prayer of Kulashekar Alvar, King Kulashekara, which Srila Prabhupada frequently quoted. Krishna tvadiya pada pankaja panjarantam adyaiva me vishatu manasarajya hamsa prana prayana samaveka favata pita kantavarodana vidau smaranam kutaste. So Kulashekar, he says that this is a prayer. He prays that, my dear Lord, at this moment, let the royal swan of my mind enter the tangled stems of your lotus feet. How will it be possible for me to remember you otherwise at the time of death, when my throat is choked with cough, when my throat will be choked up with mucus, bile and air? So in this way, King Kulashekara, he is praying, always remindful that death can come at any moment. So he is saying that I may not be able to remember you at the time of death. Better let death happen now. Right now I am able to remember you. So if death has to happen, let it happen now, because I don't know at that moment whether I will be able to remember you or not. So this is a very beautiful prayer we see of at the time of death being able to remember Krishna. There was one letter wherein Srila Prabhupada mentions about how to become a pure devotee. So he says that your question is how you can become a pure devotee, and the answer to this is given in the Bhagavad Gita. So Krishna instructs Arjuna that the Mahatma, the pure devotee, is one who has fully surrendered himself unto spiritual nature. And how can we tell if one is completely surrendered? He is fully engaged in devotional service to Krishna. So this is the process of becoming a pure devotee. So here we see Srila Prabhupada is saying, if we keep ourselves 100% engaged in Krishna service, that is the way to become a pure devotee. Shri Radha Ras Bihari Bhagwan ki, Sita Ram Lakshman Hanuman ki, Shri Gaur Nitai ki. So how do you keep ourselves engaged? So here we see, just combining this introspective intelligence and introspective analysis that we discussed about in the beginning. Just like Maharaj Khatwanga, he is taking an analysis of what his present situation is. Individually, we are all responsible for our spiritual lives. Srila Prabhupada writes in one of the purports, he says, ultimately all of us have to fly our own plane. That means in spiritual life we are responsible for our own advancement. In the initial stages we have our authorities who guide us, who tell us, but as we progress and as we mature, then the number of times they are going to tell us it reduces. So we have to take responsibility ourselves. So how can one do that? So when one analyzes what are my shortcomings and what are my weaknesses and what are my strengths, and utilize those strengths, optimize the strengths by keeping ourselves engaged, then one can take responsibility for and achieve constant engagement. So we had this experience that the bus party program is something that is totally engaging. Well, you don't really have an option there. So, in the last few days of the marathon, last month we happened to take the bus party, and because in our style, we follow Srila Prabhupada's style, wherein we do Harinam as well as books together. Because sometimes it happens that when books don't go so much, a person feels a little discouraged. But when Harinam is on, even if a person is discouraged, he goes back to the Kirtan party and then automatically feels strength and then goes back again. In fact, we had such experiences that there was one man, he was a general manager of a company, and he said that he took a book. He said that I already have this book, but apne mahol hi aisa bana diya that I had to take it. So by the Harinam, we saw that it had so much of the atmosphere which was created was so powerful that that person was forced to take a book although he had it. We have had this experience before wherein we push books or we push people, you buy, but they don't take. Whereas we saw that the Harinam, when with the big mic system, when we go and do simultaneous Harinam along with books, like in the old days. If you go back in the 70s, in the late 60s and 70s, that's how ISKCON started with Harinam. And then there used to be simultaneous book distribution also. So we saw that it had such a potency that it inspired so many people to take up books, and so many people were inspired to be engaged in Krishna service in so many ways. We saw so many times that while doing Harinam on the street, many people used to just come, approach, and they used to say that my place is empty, why don't you come and stay? Or I'll sponsor your stay in this temple for these 2 nights. How long are you here? Come to my house. So we saw that we got invitations and we were able to engage people in so many ways when this Harinam party, when we did distribution along with the Harinam party. There was one nice story of Sanatana Goswami. Sanatana Goswami and the touchstone. This was about the holy name. So there was a devotee, there was a devotee of Shiva who wanted to get his daughter married, and he approached Lord Shiva for a permanent solution to his financial problems. And Lord Shiva instructs him to go to Sanatana Goswami, who was doing bhajan. So when this man goes to Sanatana Goswami, so Sanatana Goswami says, I have a touchstone and it can solve all your problems. So the man asks, where is it? Sanatana Goswami replies, it's in the garbage. So this old man, he goes there and picks up the touchstone. He touches it to iron and it becomes gold. And he becomes so happy. He thinks, finally all my financial problems are solved. So while he's taking the touchstone and going, he then thinks to himself that Sanatana Goswami certainly must have some greater treasure than this touchstone. Otherwise, why will he throw this touchstone in garbage? So then he goes to Sanatana Goswami back and he asks him that what treasure are you hiding that you have kept this touchstone in the garbage? So to this Sanatana Goswami replies, for this you must first have to throw this touchstone in the Yamuna. Go and throw it. So this man does what he said. He goes and throws the stone. And then he comes back to Sanatana Goswami. And Sanatana Goswami then instructs him about the holy name. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So we'll end here. Any questions or comments? ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की, श्रील प्रभुपाद की, निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे।